You had various Yorkshire dialects, Scouse, Mancunian, Geordie, Scottish dialects, Welsh dialects, Irish dialects, Cockney. But I didn't have that.
He missed out West Country. He missed out West Country, where I'm from. Greetings and welcome back to another British Family Reacts video. And have we got a bloody good one for you today? It's another one from the YouTube sensation that is Lawrence Brown from Lost in the Pond. And it's entitled 7 Myths British People Believe About America, Part 2. I'm a massive fan of Lawrence Brown. He has done so well. His videos are just getting better and better and better. If I was a betting person, I would say he's going to hit 1 million subscribers in the back end of next year. You heard it here first. I'm Mr. H. You are my friends, and my family is obsessed with the US. And we're on a mission to learn all we can about your wonderful country. If that sounds good and you haven't already, please subscribe. Join our family. Come on, you know you want to. Do something amazing. Make my day and hit that subscribe button. Right, that's enough of my peddling and jibber jabber. Let's get on with the video.
Hello, this video is sponsored by BritBox, the premier streaming service for Britain's most beloved TV shows. I'm Lawrence Brown and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to myths. Specifically, myths that British people like myself believe about the United States. Real fans of Lost in the Pond will know that I've already done a part 1 in this series, so I will link to that at the end. And if you want to become a real fan and you're not yet subscribed to this channel, do that now. Thanks. You see, after doing part 1 and having lived in the United States for 14 years and 12 days, I realised that there were just lots of falsehoods that I used to believe about the United States of America, thus warranting a second video. And so, without further ado, here are 7 myths that British people believe about the United States, part 2. I used to have this friend when I lived in England who came from a wealthy family, and it was always the topic of conversation among people whenever we'd speak about this person that they had a swimming pool, and this was very, very unusual for Britain. But American television shows and Jack Black's Instagram page tend to give us this impression that every house in America has its own swimming pool. And this isn't even close to being true, because a lot of Americans I speak to say they can't even afford a swimming pool, but some would say that even if they could, they wouldn't want to put up with the maintenance of it because, you know, it takes a lot to keep that thing clean and chlorified and whatever else you have to do to it. And most houses I've been to simply don't have one. But I will say this, I think they are slightly more prevalent in the US than they are in Britain. Some houses will have them, some apartment complexes have them. In fact, I lived at one that did, and it was always packed, so I never went in it. I talk a lot on this channel about the sheer size of the United States, but there's also something to be said of the slender size of Britain. So growing up there, you very much got used to this idea that you could drive anywhere in the country well within a day, actually within a third of a day. And because Britain becomes the kind of yardstick by which you see the rest of the world, you sort of assume you can do that in other countries. And for me, the United States was surely no different. So when I visited in 2004, my ex-American girlfriend probably laughed at me when I suggested we do New York, California, and the Grand Canyon in a single week. Because it is big, right? One of the shortest routes from the East Coast to the West Coast is Savannah to San Diego. It takes 36 hours by car. Now, if you were to drive this route, which seems unlikely, you might be thinking, it's only a day and a half, we'll bring DVDs. Just remember that you have to eat and sleep and go to the toilet and take pictures of yourself over something iconic. You're probably not doing this journey in less than 3 days, so that's more or less half your week gone with just that.
Talking about long journeys, my sister and the family drove from Bayview in Idaho all the way down to Kissimmee in Florida. Crazy.
That's the shortest route. If for whatever reason you find yourself driving from Fort Kent, Maine all the way to Seattle, Washington, that's about 50 hours by car, and even then you have to cheat by driving through Canada.
Americans won't watch soccer, football. Interesting.
I am old enough to remember the 1994 World Cup, and for those of you who don't remember it, it was staged here in the United States. And at the time, I remember a lot of the narrative coming out of the British media was that the United States and its people don't care about football/soccer. But now that I live here, I've discovered that that is still sort of true, but not to the degree I thought it would be. I mean, sure, soccer is still way behind the big four, so NFL, baseball, hockey, and basketball. But whenever I've been into one of those authentic British-style pubs that you find find in the United States and there's a football match on from the Premier League, there's usually quite a lot of people in there. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, Lawrence, that's just other English immigrants. And that is partly true, but you'll hear a lot of American accents too. And, you know, they'll be bashing the referee along with the rest of us. Not literally, we get a bit rowdy. And here in Chicago, where you have the Chicago Fire, I often meet soccer fans proudly wearing the jersey of Manchester United. And once every 4 years, we have this little thing come around called the World Cup. And if the United States is involved in that, as they are at this one, Americans start to take an interest until they lose to England this Friday.
Yeah, that didn't happen, did it? That did not happen. Oh dear, it was an embarrassment. Let us know in the comments below. Did you watch that game and what do you think of it? I think, me personally, I think America should have won that. It's hard to say, but they were definitely the better team.
The other thing to mention is that soccer is played quite widely in American schools, right? You'll just be driving down the road and you'll be like, oh, there's a goalpost in America, and they're all over the place. And this is because American girls and boys seem to play soccer all the way throughout their education and then just stop. Although some do go on to play professionally, and in the case of the women's team, routinely win the World Cup.
Americans pronounce words wrong. It's very naive way of putting it like that, pronounce them wrong. I mean, I'm sure Americans think we pronounce things wrong. I have to say, in America's defense, a lot of the way you say things are almost like how they're spelt, where over here, I think we just kind of made it up. Just made the whole thing up, like, nah, it's got an I in it, but we'll just say E.
Ah yes, that long-held belief that it is in fact Americans who are wrong with their pronunciations. But firstly, has anyone ever stopped to consider that maybe none of us are wrong? That there isn't a right way to say aluminium, there are just different ways.
Yeah.
And secondly, I constantly get surprised while researching for this channel that American pronunciation of words or spelling of words or just the words themselves are often more in line with the word's origin. Take the word herb, for example, and watch my YouTube short about that very thing. The H, which most Americans drop, was originally silent in French. The way Americans pronounce the L's differently when they say paella is very much in line with how they do it in Spain. Our own British offering of paella isn't. And I could run down hundreds more examples, but that's what my YouTube shorts are for.
Americans are real. I've never thought that. I do have a story. When was it? Second time I went to America. It was in Connecticut. Old subscribers would have heard this. And I went to a Dunkin' Donuts. And I was in the queue and I was asking for a black coffee. Bearing in mind, this was probably over 20 years ago. So Dunkin' Donuts was going to go into a coffee. I was very brave. I went in on my own and I asked this American lady, so can I have a black Americano? And she looked at me and she went, what? And I was like, Americano, what? And there was like people queuing up behind me, and my face was going red. I wanted to run out. I was so embarrassed. One of those most embarrassing times of my life. And she kept going, what? And I was like, no, black coffee, just coffee, hot water, no milk, no sugar, just black coffee. What? And this guy behind me said, I think he means a black Americano. Anywho, that was probably the only time I've sort of come across anyone I thought was probably very rude. Probably didn't have that job for very long. But yes, that was the only time. But 99.99999% of the time, Americans are lovely, welcoming people.
During my life on this planet, I've definitely heard British people make the assertion that Americans are rude. And it's a weird thing because, of course, there are rude Americans. You're never going to get rid of those.
Rude people
there are
everywhere.
Rude British people too. And rudeness is something you pretty much find everywhere. And I have to say, at least in the Midwest, where I've lived in about 4 different cities now, I don't feel like I've encountered a higher degree of rudeness here than I did in the UK. And on the whole, just like with the UK, most people try to be polite. Yeah. Actually, if anything, in the UK, we have this thing among friends known as banter, in which we call each other names that if I said right now would probably get me demonetized. And, you know, in my experience, that banter does spill over into rude territory because sometimes Uncle Toby doesn't know when he's gone too far. So rudeness is sort of relative, and I tend to believe that there are no higher percentage of rude Americans than any other people on Earth.
I think a lot of these things, you never hear about the minority, and the rest of us have to sort of get the brunt of it. And, you know, people think everyone's like that, which is complete nonsense. Most of us know most people are good, law-abiding, hard-working people that have good hearts, but you only ever tend to hear about the wallies that ruin it for everyone else. So the US doesn't have many accents. Mrs. H and I would know the difference between sort of maybe a southern accent to maybe a northern. I could probably pick out like a New York accent or Boston accent, but between then, I'd find it very hard to know the difference. So I'm quite ignorant and naive in that.
I think instinctively we all think this about every country on earth except our own, because we know that our own country represents something of a rich tapestry of dialects. We just sort of become hyper aware of that fact and just assume that nowhere else in the world can say the same thing. And because I grew up in Britain, I was very much attuned to the fact that we had various Yorkshire dialects, Scouse, Mancunian, Geordie, Scottish dialects, Welsh dialects, Irish dialects, Cockney, but I didn't have that.
He missed out West Country. He missed out West Country, where I'm from.
Same awareness of American dialects. To us, there's just three. There's General American, whatever that is. There's the dialect used by mobsters in films set in New York. And then the South. And that's about it. But it was only after I lived here for a few years that I really started to hear quite a lot of differences in the sounds that would come from various parts of just the Midwest. You got the way they speak in Chicago, which is not that. That is my best impersonation. You got the way they speak in Wisconsin, which I'm not even going to try to do. And then the way they speak in Indiana, which sounds closer to Southern in my opinion. And that's just the region I've lived in. You go to the East Coast, there's an absolutely mental amount of differences in the way people say words or the words themselves, especially if you're ordering a sub sandwich.
I'm just going to quickly look at these and all the things that remind me of places in the UK. We've got Camden there. Camden, yeah, that's in London. There's Newcastle. We would say Newcastle as in word, but it looks like Newcastle. Chester, Lancaster, Reading, Easton, Jersey. There's quite a few names here that are the same in the UK. And I guess, obviously you guys would know that as well. But very interesting.
Same in the South, same in the West, same in the Rockies, same in the Pacific Northwest. It's almost a poem, just without the Great Plains. Great Plains.
Americans don't have a sense of humour. No. Watching the Naked Guns and the airplanes back, it's very slapstick, but that even to this day, I can watch Naked Gun with Leslie Nielsen, God bless you, sir, and I'll be laughing through the whole film. I think it's just incredibly funny. That's just one of many American programs. It's just had me creasing up.
And finally, I've touched on this before, I think that Americans, much like Germans, often get this reputation that they don't have a sense of humour. What we actually mean when we say that is they don't have a British sense of humour. How dare America differ from that in any conceivable way? But they do. They even spell humour differently, which should have been our first clue. One of the chief accusations that you'll hear from the British is that Americans don't understand sarcasm. That to them, the concept of irony is reserved for the nation's industrial workers. That was a joke about iron. But this has never been my experience. Long before I moved to the United States, I recognized these very traits in The Onion, both the satirical rag and the vegetable, whose comedy doesn't get enough credit for how multi-layered it is. And if you're interested in this subject and you would like a more detailed breakdown on how these differences manifest, then check out my video, 5 Ways British and American Humour is Very Different.
Guys, what a fantastic video. Guys, if you would like to see me do more Lost and Upon reactions, please let me know by liking this video. And if you haven't already, please come join us. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Be part of our amazing community. Be a legend. Do something amazing today. Make our day. And all that leaves me to say is take care. God bless. Bloody love all of you. And see you in the next video.